presentations in 44 countries around the world, but I'm going to do something today that I have never done. I'm going to let you, the crowd, choose what I actually talk about. It's sort of like Hawaii Five-0. You got two different episodes that you get to choose from. So we're going to do a little experiment here, see how it works. So I have two different presentations that I could give. One is what I would call the learn by hearing. That is, I will spend the next 25 minutes talking about innovation, talking about crowdsourcing, and what it is that you can learn from the stories and experiences that I've had. The second option is what I will call the learn by doing. And I have a couple of experiences that I can put you through that will very quickly get you to not just hear the story, but experience why some of the things we do and think about in the world of innovation actually don't work. So you've got two options. I'm curious which one you want. How many of you want to have the learn by hearing and just have me talk for 25 minutes? Okay, one. Okay, how many of you would like to learn by doing and go through a couple of experiences? All right, and I know there's a few of you who don't raise your hands in public. That's okay. So here's what I want to do. We're going to dive right into this. We're going to dive right into this, and we are going to do an exercise that will measure how fast your brain operates. This was developed by a colleague of mine who is a neurobehaviorist. And what we're going to do, what you need to do is first grab a notebook, a piece of paper, and some kind of writing instrument. And as you are doing that, I will give you the rules of this competition. Here's how it's going to work. I have up here, in my special notebook, a list of numbers. I'm going to read these numbers off to you in rapid-fire fashion, much like an auctioneer. Your objective is to write down as many of these numbers as you possibly can. I will tell you that having done this with tens of thousands of people, no one has gotten them all right. There might be someone here today who can do it though. Because it's not just about the speed of your brain. It's not the absolute speed, but it's also your ability to recover from interruption. So interspersed amongst the numbers, I am going to give you a command. In order to be deemed as having the fastest brain in the room, you not only need to get the most numbers right, but you need to write down an appropriate response to each of the commands I give you. Who thinks they have the fastest brain? I'm just curious. Now, of course, it's different at different times. The coffee might not have kicked in. If we do this again later, we might have a different response, but let's give this a try. All right, here we go. Everybody ready? 27, 83, 452, 595, 683, 474, 1,822, 66, 44, 10, 40, 80, 90, 372, 483, 695, 27, 88. Write down a color. 432, 627, 788, 362, 44, 783, 792, 688, 47. Write down a piece of furniture. 88, 362, 485, 552, 433, 699, 788, 622. Write down the name of a genius. 66, 433, 752, 88, 792, 422. Put your pens down. All right, who thinks you got them all right? You do? Well, here's the sad story then. I was reading from a blank sheet of paper. I have no idea what numbers I just said. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to stand up. If when I asked you to write down a color, you didn't write anything down, or you didn't write a color, or you wrote down red, blue, green, or yellow, please take a seat. All right, at this point, usually we will have black or white. Anybody sit down with black or white? Purple or pink? All right. Brown or orange? What do we have left? Emerald? All right. Hey, that's awesome. Good. All right, everybody stand back up. And for the piece of furniture, you wrote down sofa, chair, table, desk, or couch. Please take a seat. If you wrote down bed, please take a seat. What did you have?
Stool.
Stool? Stool, all right. Last one, everybody stand up. If for the genius you wrote down nothing, or you wrote down Einstein, take a seat. If you wrote down your own name, you can take a seat. Thank you very much. You lost a couple there. If you wrote down the name of someone you worked with and you're sucking up to them, you can take a seat. And at this point, we have usually a few answers: Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, etc., etc. So everyone take a seat. The point of this exercise is that, yes, okay, this is sort of an artificial exercise, that we created a lot of stress. But here's the thing that we know. The thing that we know is that expertise is the enemy of innovation. Expertise is the enemy of innovation. The more you know about something, the more difficult it is for you to think differently about it. And with this exercise, what we've demonstrated is actually the way the brain is wired. The brain is not wired for innovation and change. It is wired for survival and replication. The brain basically thinks to itself, I'm alive today, I was alive yesterday, I was alive the day before that, I must be doing something right. Therefore, change is not encouraged. And in fact, we build neural pathways in the brain to things we think about a lot. So colors, for example, red, blue, green, yellow, these are the 4 primary colors of paint and light. This is what we were taught of as a kid. So the more we think about something, the more we build these grooves in our brain which have us get to a solution. Now, that wouldn't necessarily be bad, except there's one problem. And I'll give you the problem through an analogy. I am a somewhat disorganized person, and I misplace my keys. I'm not joking, I misplace my keys at least once a week. And I look everywhere for my keys, and you're looking in your pants and your desk and your jacket. 15 minutes goes by, and you're looking for something. When you find them, what do we inevitably say to ourselves? Can you believe it? They were in the last place I looked. Well, of course, who finds something and keeps on looking for it? That would be crazy. And the same thing is true of the brain. When we're an expert, we will stop looking for solutions because we will find one very quickly. This is why crowdsourcing can actually be extremely useful, because, look, expertise is actually quite valuable. But it's only valuable in the domain in which you're trying to develop incremental solutions. The breakthroughs always, inevitably come from different domains of expertise. It is about connecting to different experts in different areas, and this is where crowdsourcing can be wildly useful. So we're going to talk about crowdsourcing and how we make it work. How we make it work. Because, we heard David talking, there's a lot of different ways that people are using crowdsourcing. There's a lot of people trying crowdsourcing, and I'll tell you, from my perspective, there are more failures than there are successes, and there's more great PR going on as it relates to crowdsourcing than real, proven ROI. So what I want to talk about now is how do we extract as much value as we possibly can from a crowdsourcing effort. And we're going to do another quick exercise here. I'm going to show you a question, and when you know the answer to the question, don't shout out the answer, but raise your hand and write the number down on a piece of paper. You can type it on your tablet if you want, whatever you want to do. But when you're 100% positive you know the answer, raise your hand and write it down. So here's the scenario. There's a tournament. If you like sports, you can think of it as NCAA basketball. If you don't like sports, it could be a chess tournament. It doesn't matter. But it is a tournament that they call single elimination. And basically what single elimination means is that you have 2 teams who play. The winner advances to the next round. The loser is eliminated. There are 64 teams playing. You can get out a piece of paper. You can draw these charts. By the way, important point, this is not for 64 teams. I couldn't fit 64 on here. So if you're going to try to cheat and actually just count there, it's not going to work. Here's the question. How many games need to be played in order to determine which team is the champion? And the answer is not 1. I know that's a nice creative answer. That's not what I'm looking for. I actually want to know, okay, if these 2 play, that's 1 game. Okay, and then these 2 play, that's another game. And these 2 play, that's another game. How many take? Okay, so raise your hands. Don't let me see the number. Nope. Nope. Yes, yes. Okay, we'll stop there. We don't have that much time. Great. So here's the point of the question I just asked. The way you frame or phrase a question will have a massive impact on how you think about and find solutions. So I intentionally put up the graphic. I intentionally, with this, tried to mislead you. But there's a much easier way to try to solve this problem. If I asked you the question, not how many games have to be played in order to determine who's the winner, if I asked you how many games need to be played to eliminate all of the losers, well, if there's 64 teams playing and one team wins, how many teams have to lose? 63. Therefore, if a team is eliminated every time, how many games need to be played? It is 63. If you don't believe me, you can go off and you can build a chart for 64 teams. The way you ask the question will have a profound impact on how you think about the solution. To me, the most important quote related to innovation is reputedly something that Einstein said. He said, if I had an hour to save the world, I would spend 59 minutes defining the problem, 1 minute finding solutions. 59 minutes defining the problem, 1 minute finding solutions, and from my experience, most organizations are running around spending 60 minutes on things that don't matter. They're either working on things that aren't important, or they're working on important things, but they haven't phrased the question in a way that will accelerate the finding of solutions. Let me give you an example that we probably all know. Anybody remember? We'll do a little trivia question. April 20th, 2010. What was in the news on that day? I wouldn't have known if I were in the audience. It was actually the Deepwater Horizon oil rig exploded on that day. And over the next 87 days, 180 million gallons of crude oil pumped into the Gulf Coast of the United States. And as you know, they tried several different innovations in a way to stop the flow of the oil. And after several of these failed, they turned to what any smart innovator would turn to. Crowdsourcing. They set up a website. Basically, it said this: we have a problem. Do you have a solution? And they encouraged concerned citizens and scientists and movie stars to submit their solutions. Over the subsequent weeks, they received 123,000 submissions. 123,000 submissions. Now, think about it for a moment. Because if you think about this example, what that meant was 99.99% of the time people thought about the problem, submitted the problem, evaluated the problem, was actually a waste of time. An innovation strategy like this, to me, it's not just like finding a needle in a haystack. It's actually like finding a specific needle in a stack of other needles. It's not very efficient. Let's talk about another well-known example. So remember, we had 123,000 submissions here. Well, I love my Starbucks idea. Very well-known example of crowdsourcing and crowdsourcing to your customers. Now, here's really the interesting thing is, I went through it, I counted the number, and this is only the first page. You can scroll down. This is the first page. You can count the number of ideas that have been submitted. It's 123,000. I was actually shocked that it adds up to the same number. Now, clearly, they could not implement 123,000. They've implemented some, and look, there's some value from that. But I want you to consider this for the moment. Now, most of you didn't vote for my talk to you for 25 minutes. You wanted some experiences, but for the person who did say that you wanted me to talk, wasn't there a little bit of disappointment that I went off and did an activity?
No, I just did it to be honored.
You did? Okay, so you're just the disruptor, the troublemaker in the room.
I like to learn via auditory.
Okay, excellent.
But, you know, I knew what the results were going to be, so.
Excellent. Well, if you are one of the people who submit something, and they didn't hear you, they didn't implement you, they didn't take it, this is not actually good morale building with your customer base. But we want to move from suggestions to solutions. That is really the point here. We want to move from suggestions to solutions. We don't need people's opinions, ideas. You go into an organization. I can't tell you how many companies love to set up their idea management system. It is basically a suggestion box for employees to provide suggestions on anything that they want. And I've seen this over and over and over. The first 6 months are great. Lots of ideas, lots of low-hanging fruit, lots of things that maybe people thought about that we haven't implemented, maybe a couple of new ideas. And then after 6 months, the noise starts to pick up. The value starts to decrease. And all of a sudden, these programs implode due to the weight of the bad ideas, the low-value ideas, the good ideas that didn't get implemented because nobody could find a home for them. So we want to twist the model around. And the model to twist it around is to actually be better at asking questions. So we hear this expression in the innovation world all the time. Think outside the box. How many of you have heard that expression at least 1,000 times? And how many of you just like have a little negative reaction to that? Well, anybody who tells you to think outside the box, in my opinion, has less intelligence than this cat. For those of you who can't read it, the cat is saying, I don't care what anyone else says. I do my best thinking inside the box. And here's the point. In the world of innovation, you don't want people to think outside the box. That creates noise, that creates irrelevance, and it actually creates lower quality solutions. What you want is, instead of thinking outside the box, you want to find a better box. You want to be able to find the right question, issue, problem, challenge, or opportunity and frame it in a way that will increase the likelihood of finding important and relevant solutions. Let me give you one example here. Think about the educational system. I've been trying to improve the educational system for years, and some work that was done in the UK by a nonprofit there looking to improve the educational system. If you think about that, and let's say you want to crowdsource a solution to improving the educational system, what are the types of things we might hear from the crowd? What are the things we might need to improve? Test scores, technology, teachers pay, the quality of the teachers, the curriculum, whether it's transportation, all these different things. And here's the reality, they've thought about all these things. They'll look at the aging infrastructure, they'll look at the teachers pay, they'll look at nutrition. Here's the question. What is the one thing that has been scientifically proven to have the greatest impact on a child's learning? What is the one thing which by far has the greatest impact?
Parents.
Parents. Parental involvement. The right parental involvement. Some parental involvement's not so good. When they crowdsourced a solution looking for a way to get parents involved, what was very interesting is they found a solution in Bogota, Colombia, where there's an experimental school that has 100% parental involvement, and they're now testing this model in other places. If we try to ask the question, how do we improve the educational system, we would have gotten nowhere. Because it would have been this big, abstract, fluffy thing. I mean, one of the things, if you think about it, like I always talk about this as the Goldilocks principle. The Goldilocks principle is basically this. We don't want to, for those who don't know Goldilocks, in case you missed your childhood, Goldilocks and the Three Bears goes into a house. There's 3 bears, there's 3 beds, there's 3 cups of porridge, and one of the beds is too hard, another bed is too soft, and another one is just right. When doing any kind of innovation effort, and in particular a crowdsourcing effort, you want to make sure your questions, your challenges, your opportunities are just right in the way they're framed. You don't want them to be overly abstract, because if I ask an abstract question, like how do I stop the flow of oil, I'll get a lot of abstract answers. If I ask how do I improve productivity, I will get a lot of abstract answers. How do we increase revenue? How do we reduce costs? These are useless questions to ask a crowd. Because I guarantee you, although you might get 10,000 solutions, I also guarantee you that none of them will have any real value. On the other side, though, so that's sort of the too abstract, too soft, too fluffy. The too firm side of the equation is where we get too specific, and that we imply a particular solution. we think we know the solution, and therefore we tend to imply a particular solution. Let me just give you, I was just jotting down this morning some different types of challenges I've seen. So, for example, here's an example of an abstract one. A mobile phone company in Europe, a couple of years ago, call center volumes were just going crazy and wait times were through the roof, and so they crowdsourced to their employees, what do we do in order to improve call center productivity, improve the quality of the call center? And they got a bunch of useless answers back. So I had them go back and actually research what is going on, and as it turns out in this particular case, a large percentage of the calls were from literally 2 lines on the invoice that were sent to their customers who had the iPhone, because they were the first company in their country to offer the iPhone. And this was just very confusing in terms of the data charges. So by fixing those 2 lines, they actually dropped call volumes 20% overnight and fixed a lot of the problems. So they asked the wrong question, it was too broad. Just did something with the Men's Health Organization. They're trying to get men to get tested, trying to get men to be healthy, and so their question they've always been looking at is, well, how do we get men to go get tested so they can get healthy, get drugs or whatever they need? It's actually, from my perspective, the wrong question. Guys would rather die on a couch than go to a doctor. But here's what we know. Women, their partners, are the ones who have the greatest influence over them. So when we shifted the question not to how do we get guys to do it, but how do we get their partners to influence them, very different answers. Or an insurance company looking for a way to increase the sales of insurance. Pretty standard question, but one of the things that they didn't realize was that their biggest competition these days is not other insurance companies. Their biggest competition is the fact that millennials, the Gen Yers, don't care about the future. And therefore trying to sell them something which is future-oriented is going to be fraught with disaster. So by understanding how do we motivate millennials to want to think about the future, fundamentally different question. I want to give you one last example before I close here. This is just I love this story. Toothpaste. Toothpaste is one of the most, I think it is one of the most mundane products on the planet. But if you go into a supermarket or a drugstore, pretty much every toothpaste these days has one thing in common. They whiten teeth. And so if you think about it, most whitening toothpaste use some form of abrasive or some form of bleach. So a company, the company that manufactures this toothpaste, decided they wanted to develop a new whitening toothpaste that didn't use abrasives or bleaches. Now if you think about how you would phrase the question, again this is all about framing the question, our natural wiring is to ask, how do we solve this particular problem? But what they realize is that's very limiting. So they asked a different question. This is a question I want you to think about when framing anything that you're working on, whether it's crowdsourcing or any innovation effort. Instead of asking, how do we solve this problem? Ask yourself, who else has solved the problem like this? Who else has solved the problem like this? So what they realized was instead of asking, how do we make teeth whiter, they asked the question, who else makes whites whiter when they're not using bleach? And the answer is laundry detergent. Yes. So inside of Unilever, there is a laundry detergent division. Well, guess what? The people who make toothpaste in the history of the company never talked to these people, so they went over and they asked them, how is it that you make whites whiter? And they were told something very interesting. They were told, we don't. We make whites blue. Laundry detergent is blue for a reason. Blue dye creates an optical illusion, an optical effect that prevents the reflection of yellow. When you wash your clothes in non-bleach detergent, they're still dingy yellow, you just can't see it. So they thought this would be really cool, and they went off and they created a toothpaste that uses the same technology. For those of you who can't see the toothpaste, there it is. It is a toothpaste that has a blue dye in it that instead of taking weeks or months to whiten your teeth, will instantly whiten your teeth. Ask yourself, when you're working on any kind of innovation initiative, how do I reframe the question? Because the key here is really, how do I get access to the people who think differently about this problem? Rocket science isn't always rocket science. And the point of that speech was that sometimes the best solutions, even in rocket science, are going to come from other areas. Could come from laundry detergent, from musicians, from Hollywood. So I want to leave you with this. Whatever kind of challenge you're working on, let's just say it's an aerospace engineering challenge, and you have 100 aerospace engineers working on an aerospace engineering problem, and you can't find a solution, adding the 101st aerospace engineer is going to make no difference. But if you can add a nanotechnologist, a biologist, someone who's a musician, you'll get some of the breakthroughs. And to me, this is the huge opportunity of crowdsourcing. It gives you the opportunity to connect with people you wouldn't otherwise connect with. Thank you very much.